Hello, everyone. This is Steve Marinucci, Beatles Examiner on Examiner.com, welcoming you to another Things We Said Today, our weekly talk fest where we discuss anything and everything about the Beatles. Before we get started, let me introduce the three co-hosts of this show that keep this thing running and moving and grooving and whatever. Anyway, starting up in the great state of Maine, we have our musicologist and man who knows all about all kinds of music, classical, avant-garde, other, and anything else we want to ask him about, Mr. Allan Cozen. Hello there, Allan.
Hey, Steve. How you doing? Hello, everyone.
And going down the East Coast, we have in Connecticut, we have the host of the Beatles show, Every Little Thing, Mr. Ken Michaels. Hello, Ken.
Hey, Steve. Hi, everybody.
And down in Pennsylvania, the home of the newly crowned Stanley Cup champion Pittsburgh Penguins.
That's right.
Not right there. Yeah, they beat my San Jose Sharks.
That's right.
They did. Not that they really had a chance, because I thought Pittsburgh was going to win anyway. But that's besides the point. Mr. Al Sussman, how you doing, Al?
Hey, Steve. Hello there, everybody.
And this week we have a special guest on the line with us. We're going to talk about the Monkees and their Beatle connections, and the man to somebody I've known for a long time. He's been a member of my Beatles message board, Abbey Road message board, Mr. Fred Velez. Fred, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Steve. Hi, guys. Hi, everybody. Hi, everyone out there.
Hey, Fred.
Hey, hi. It's good to be here.
First thing, congratulations. You and your lovely lady, Linda Walsh, tied the knot a couple of weeks ago.
Yes, we did. Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate that very much. Applause.
Applause.
Just throw money. But no, I guess
there's a guy out there who has $2 that he's willing to send to.
Oh, good. Send it to the wedding registry.
Okay.
Right, here we go.
He'll get you a quiet mouse.
Oh, there you go.
There we go.
I would imagine you used Monkee songs for your wedding song.
Oh, yes, we did. We started the first dance with "It's Nice to Be with You."
Oh.
Very nice.
That's our song.
Yeah.
And then 2 weeks after the real wedding, we did a renewal of the vows at the Monkee Jam Convention in New Jersey in the Meadowlands, in which I was dressed in Mickey's poncho tablecloth.
Oh my gosh!
And we did Monkee vows, using song titles and lyrics, and it was very nice. The fans enjoyed it.
Very cool. Very cool. Let me start with It's really kind of, I mean, I don't know about everybody else, but the 50th anniversary of the Monkees just kind of crept up on me. I mean, it's hard to believe it's been 50 years.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is hard to believe. It's like only yesterday we just saw the show for the first time.
Right. I mean, what do you think has kept the show going so well and so popular? I mean, it's really, and I've noticed this in my, in the time I've been Monkees Examiner, there's a level of fandom with fans of the Beatles, and there's a different level of fandom with the Monkees fans, and it's really intense. Not to say that the Beatles isn't, but there's just a different level there. What do you see that too?
Yes, I do. I think it's because the Monkees came out of two medias. They came out of television first. Actually, they came out of television and records and music, but they both converged at the same. I think because you had that, because it was part of the whole Beatlemania thing at the time. We were still riding the wave of Beatlemania, and then you had this show that was obviously based on the Beatles come out with a whole different set of guys, and you got to know them, even though they're playing characters. They're basically playing themselves, and I think the fact that they played them characters as Peter, Davy, Mickey, and Mike personalized them to the fans a lot. Because I remember, even when we saw the Beatles on television, Ed Sullivan and things like that, it was always in a concert thing or a brief interview thing, whatever. But you never really, per se, got to know them, if you know what I mean. With the Monkees, it was like a more, they were in your living room every week, and you really, and in some strange way you got to know them that way, and their personalities came through on the screen, so that when you got like interviews like out of 16 magazine or Tiger Beat, you got to know them a little bit more. I mean, Mickey used to have his sister Coco write columns in Tiger Beat and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that helped personalize things. And even Michael Nesmith's wife Phyllis, his first wife Phyllis, wrote some stuff like fashion tips and things. So it became a more personal thing than I think the Beatles did, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, you had some incredible music, with the Monkees, written by, I mean, the cream of songwriting at the time, like Carole King and Neil Diamond, Neil Sedaka. You had Boyce and Hart. You had people like Harry Nilsson, Carol Bayer Sager,
David
Gates, Paul Williams. You had incredible songwriters, and the Monkees themselves individually were good songwriters. Michael Nesmith, in particular, is an amazing songwriter, and Mickey Dolenz has shown his talent in his songs, and Peter Tork as well, and even Davy in the songs that he's written definitely showed talent in that regard.
You're right, and what's really, and I don't want to get too far ahead because I was actually going to wait on talking about Good Times until later, but I mean, I was really surprised how well Good Times worked. I really did not expect Good Times to be as good as it is, to go in the manner I expect. I don't know about you, but I fully expected that when I heard that they were going to use modern songwriters, that we were looking at another kind of Pool It for those who don't know, was one of the several Monkees reunion attempts.
It was the first one. It was the first one after the singles from 1986.
Right. And they tried to update the sound, and it did not work really.
Can I just say, Heart and Soul, I thought was an amazing
I loved Heart and Soul
record. That was a great song. I don't know why that song wasn't a huge hit.
I could talk about MTV, but I don't know. We have enough hours in this podcast. You'll have to read my book, guys.
Your book, which is called
A Little Bit Me, A Little Bit You: The Monkees from a Fan's Perspective. It was all about my experiences as a fan of the group from the very beginning to more recently, and not just my stories, but other fan stories too, including some from people like Dave Alexander, who's in the Monkees band, and people who've worked with them. So, I have a chapter in there regarding the whole MTV thing. So if you guys want to read about that, it's right there in the book.
And how does one get the book?
The usual outlets: Amazon, Apple iBooks, Barnes & Noble, Nook, Smashwords, CreateSpace. I'm there, folks. You can find me. Go out in a buying frenzy.
There we go. Yeah, I mean, I was very impressed with what they did with Good Times. I did not expect them to retro to the 60s, and they did a marvelous job. They did a marvelous job.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
So I'm going to turn it around the table. Go ahead, Mr. Cousin. Why don't you take a shot?
About Good Times?
No, about the anything you want.
Yeah, the Monkees. I mean, the Monkees was, I remember when they first came on, among Beatle fans, there was a lot of suspicion. Because it seemed to be, they were saying Prefab 4, and it seemed to be kind of, and plus, the magazines that were on the stands in those pre-Rolling Stone days were like 16 magazine. It was always Beatles versus Monkees, Monkees versus Beatles, And the issues that they were interested in, like, who's cuter, didn't really matter that much to me. But it kind of, the music, what the Beatles were doing was, from my point of view, a lot more serious at that point in 1966 going on 67 than what the Monkees were doing. And yet there was no way to not get drawn in by the twanginess of Last Train to Clarksville, and and sort of like against almost as a guilty pleasure in a way. I remember going and getting more Monkees and other things, and I kind of liked a lot of it at the time, and over the years have probably blown a little hot and cold, but generally speaking, I mean, I've got an awful lot of their stuff on my iTunes playlist, and and I too was also really, really pleased with Good Times. I mean, and particularly, I mean, I think the first thing I heard, which is probably the first thing everybody heard, is "She Makes Me Laugh," and
oh god,
right,
and that is just such a good song. That nice little harmonic twist in the chorus, on "She Makes Me Smile," it's just so beautiful and irresistible. And I know all of the people who feel that hip hop has saved music from itself probably don't find very much in this record, and they're saying, "Oh, you rockists are into it," But it's a great record in that style. It's very well recorded. It's very well produced. It's got all four voices, which is kind of was a surprise. Yeah, I mean, I just I really liked it. I just listened to it again before the show, and I've listened to it a couple of times, and it's great.
Fred and I were talking before about an hour or so ago, and I was talking about the bonus tracks. There are several bonus tracks out there among various retailers, and he and I have both heard them all, and they are, unlike the bonus tracks on most albums, they are exceptional. They are very, very and I am really and I fully expect them to do what Paul McCartney has done and put everything out at some point. Now, I certainly hope they do, because
I hope so.
The one I really like is Terrifying, which
I love
like,
Terrifying.
Which I really dreaded hearing when I saw the name, but after I heard it, I went, "My God, this is fantastic! I can't believe that that it's called Terrifying, because it's great."
It is. It's great, and I like the fast version of Me and Magdalena, because it reminds. It reminds me a little bit of the two versions of I Want to Be Free. The slow version everybody knows, and the faster version that's from the first from the TV pilot.
I have to say the original mix of Me and Magdalena took me a while to get into, because as I mentioned in a couple of places, the version I got because I was reviewing the MP3s was a little compressed, but when I heard the video version in the EPK, it was like opening up a whole new world. It sounds so much better on the CD and there, The compressed version does not sound as good to me, but I mean it's great, and I'm really glad for them. And it hit number 14 on Billboard. It debuted on number. I just wrote this a couple of days ago. Number 14 on Billboard, and they hit the top 100 artists this week, and the Beatles are not there.
They're outselling the Beatles again.
There we go. There we go.
Didn't they say in 1967
that
they outsold the Beatles and the Rolling Stones?
And the Stones.
And they still are.
I also heard combined, the Beatles and Stones combined. I don't know if that's true.
I think very possibly, yeah.
I know.
Because more of the Monkees was the biggest selling album of the year.
Right.
The first four albums, hit number one?
They all hit number one. They all hit number one, the first four.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I looked that up in my Billboard stats the other day. Oh yeah, and the fifth one, and what was it?
Birds and Bees of the Monkees.
Yeah,
that was number 3.
Was it number 3, or I was going to say number 19? Okay.
No, it was number. It reached number 3, I believe. That was the highest chart placing. I mean, that was the last time the Monkees albums were in the top 20 or something like that.
Yeah.
Until now.
Yeah, I got to tell you, when I first heard She Makes Me Laugh, I had the same reaction as that story. I'm sure you guys know the story about when the Beatles were recording Free as a Bird, the Threedles. We're recording Free as a Bird, and listening to the playback, and Ringo's there, he's listening, and he says, "It's the frickin' Beatles." That's the way I felt. That's the way I said, "It's the Monkees," when I heard it the first time. And I was so thrilled.
Although, I got to tell you, I think Mickey's in better voice now than he's ever been. He sounds amazing.
He does.
I think he's been in an amazing voice for a long time.
He does, but he seems there's something, having seen him the last couple of years at the fest and then hearing this album, he just sounds fabulous. And hey, we've been doing a fair amount of talking about Paul McCartney, who's of a similar age, and Mickey, sounds, to me, he seems to sound better than ever.
I think that has a lot to do with Mickey as an actor, because I'm sure you know that Mickey has done Broadway,
of course,
and he's had vocal lessons done, proper vocal lessons done, so he could do theater, musical theater, and because he had the proper training, he's able to use his voice better. And I don't know if Paul, you guys would know this better. Did Paul ever do proper vocal training for his voice?
No.
That's probably why.
And you can tell.
Actually, and I wrote up that thing on Pink Pop last night, and the video I found of "Can't Buy Me Love," his voice really sounds rough, really strained. And I saw some notes last night online that there were a lot of comments on social media about how his voice sounds, and but no, Mickey sounds fantastic. Yeah, he sounds in better voice on this album than I can remember in many, many years. He just he really sounds wonderful.
Because last year I saw Mickey do his a little bit Broadway, a little bit rock and roll show at Below 54 in New York, and we did a mixture of rock and roll Monkee songs and Broadway tunes, and he was incredible. He was there with a little combo. And he did the Broadway songs fantastic, that. So I think, again, I attribute that to him, his technique as an actor doing musical theater, to how good his vocals sound.
Well, there are a number of people out there, veterans, who have taken voice lessons late in life, and they've benefited from it. I've actually heard that, this is hard to believe, but Barbra Streisand, when she was around 60, she was taking voice lessons because she wasn't happy with the sound of her voice, if you can believe that. But, there are people who, in their 70s, they sound still phenomenal.
Didn't Ringo take vocal lessons too? I think he did.
I never heard that.
Didn't I hear somewhere that Ringo did take
I think you're right, Fred. I think there has been some. Allan, does that ring a bell to you? I think it does.
It does ring a bell. I think simply for the sake of preservation and being able to sing as much as he sings now, which isn't the whole show, but it's more than he used to sing with the Beatles, which is one song. So I think he did see someone. Because when I interviewed him in '89, I was asking him, what are you going to do to avoid what happened with George? Because George wasn't used to going out on tour, and he basically had wrecked his voice, I guess, in the rehearsals even. And he was well aware of that. And I'm pretty sure that he mentioned that he was, seeing like a vocal coach, not serious lessons, but just to know how to, project and preserve his voice. It would be a little surprising if Paul hadn't, everyone's body is different. I mean, sometimes you can keep going into your 70s, and sometimes it takes a toll. Paul's been out on tour for quite a long time now, between '89 and now, and it may, and he does the whole show, and the whole show's like close to 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours.
That's right.
So
plus a sound check.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, I just saw Ringo last week in Bergen Pack, and I thought he did a fantastic show. and he sounded great, and he was moving all over that stage and everything. The man is almost 76, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And look at I know, and he's still going at it. And I said, God bless him. He's doing fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
He's still doing jumping jacks too.
Yeah,
I know. Yeah. I know. Every time I see that, I just kind of go, "Oh my God!" That is fantastic.
He's the Jack LaLanne of the rock and roll world.
There you go. All you use is yeah. Go ahead.
You got a question, Ken?
Not so much. I just wanted to say that my whole experience with the Monkees was that in the '60s, I loved from the very beginning the Beatles, and in a way I kind of resisted the Monkees. And my older brother was a Monkees fan, and we used to have fights all the time, like brothers do, as to who was the better band. But as I got older, I really began to appreciate the Monkees a lot, and the similarities, obviously, like you were saying, Fred. How many bands can you think of besides the Beatles and the Monkees where it wasn't just about the music? It was also their personalities. And each of their personalities were outlined in the TV show. With the Beatles, you had the movies.
Right, yeah, exactly.
And you had the press conferences, and that was about it. So, that played a big part. But overall, I've very often defended the Monkees a lot because I really hate when people debate over whether or not they were a real band. And, even though the Monkees benefited from having, like you said, the cream of the crop, really, brill-building writers. You can't get better than Carole King and Jerry Goffin and Neil Diamond and Neil Sedaka and those people. But not only that, they carried themselves so well on the records. I mean, it is them that are singing.
Exactly.
And, Mickey Dolenz, to me, has always been one of the greatest rock singers of all time who never gets the credit for it.
I totally agree with that.
And I think the mere fact that the Monkees are not respected or haven't been respected for so long, and there's always that debate as to whether or not they're a real band, that people don't take them seriously no matter how talented they are.
I know.
And
I don't know if you guys saw the recent CBS This Morning interview with the three of them.
Mm-hmm.
I love when they asked Mike about what do you react when people say you guys aren't real, and Mike says, well, define your terms.
Yeah.
Well, in a way, it's partly the fault of the TV presentation and the publicity around it. I mean, they didn't do very much to dispel the reports that, it was always said that they didn't play their instruments, and they did, I believe, have studio players on some of the early albums.
Yeah,
but what was never said was that they actually were good.
Yeah.
That they actually were okay players, and that someone like Mike Nesmith, no one was telling us at the time that this guy actually has done a lot. He's a very accomplished musician. He's a great songwriter. It was really sort of well after the Monkees broke up that, at least for me, that I sort of cottoned on to that. I was like, wait, you telling me this guy wrote different drum, And I think they
and Torque was a good musician too.
Yeah, I think they could have. I'm just saying. I think they could have maybe said a bit more about that. And I have a feeling that later on, when the TV show was petering out and the Monkees were trying to take control of their studio work, and all of that, sort of towards the end of their career when there were disputes between, I guess, them and Don Kirshner. I think they
Don Kirshner, yeah.
Yeah, I think they were trying to establish, to tell the world, look, we actually are musicians, we actually are writers and players. But by then, I think it should have been done earlier, and I think that maybe the people doing the publicity for the TV show should have actually made that part of what they were saying, part of the message. We put these guys together, and we're having them do a sort of faux Beatles and all that, but it's not like these are just four talentless guys, See what I'm saying?
Well,
what I often say is that
when the first records, Michael Nesmith has said that when they saw the credits on the first album, he says, where's the credits for all the other musicians on this thing? How come it just shows us? It gives a false impression that we did all the music on this thing when we didn't, And then it was even worse on more of the Monkees, where Don Kirshner basically took credit for the whole thing, and thanked all the songwriters and all that. And at the very end, and thanks to the Monkees. At the very end of the thing, and the Monkees, that second album, or the Monkees, even though it was the most successful album they put out, they didn't even know it was coming out. They had to buy a copy, because nobody told them that the second album was out.
Nice.
And they were furious with that, and that's where Mickey and Mike Avoy called it the Palace Revolution, where they fought to get the right to perform on their own records. They could have some form of legitimacy, because they knew their peers knew what was going on. I mean, the Beatles always liked the Monkees. The Beatles got it, as they used to say. The Beatles got what the whole thing was about. Yeah. And it was like everybody else that said, "Oh, your guys are phony," or all this kind of this blah blah blah. And I love. I'm sure Steve has played this interview of Paul McCartney from 1967 that a fan recorded. Was recording an interview with Paul McCartney, and got into the whole thing about the Monkees, how they were copying the Beatles, and Paul defended the Monkees, which I thought was fantastic, was great. Because he, like I said, he got it. He knew what it was all about.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
I remember seeing a comment from John Lennon from around that time where he said something to the effect of, "Hey, you try doing a weekly TV show and make records at the same time and see how well you do."
I remember that. I remember that comment. Also, the other one where he says, "The Monkees aren't like the Beatles at all. They're more like the Marx Brothers."
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Which may have something to do with the whole respect thing, Allan, that you were talking about, because there's this whole comedy thing that goes on where they do little comedy bits and jokes between each other, and it almost takes away from some of the seriousness of the music. Fred, do you agree with that?
Yes, to a degree. Because the Beatles joked around too. I mean, you can see some of those videos, especially on the Beatles one video collection. You see that they're goofing around and joking around on those things, and that's a sort of precursor to what the Monkees were going to be doing later on. So, I mean, the whole thing with Hard Day's Night is, again, it was you could see elements of the Monkees in Hard Day's Night and Help, especially Help. I think Help was probably more influential towards the TV show. So yeah, and the humor helped the Beatles a lot, and I think the humor helped the Monkees a lot as well. So, because I look at it the case look at the Rolling Stones. The Rolling Stones were not a humorous band.
No, not at all. Not at all. No.
Well, the Beatles and the Monkees, it was they were much more endearing. You know what I mean? Because of the humor, because of the comedy. Because you had that element. You had both a comedy act and a music act going on in the cases of both groups.
Well, for me, what I've often said is that as much as I love the music, and I think that what they created, in the 60s there, the Monkees, that music gets stronger through time for me. A lot of that has to do with the fact that they're just great songs and they were executed well. But the story of the Monkees itself is just as compelling as the music.
Right.
And, the whole idea of the fact that these were four guys that really had musical backgrounds to begin with. And they really weren't hired to be musicians, right? They were hired to be actors.
No. Yeah, but here's the thing about that. And this has been coming out more recently, that when they did the auditions for the Monkees originally, if you look at the ads, the requirement is that you had to play music too. You just can't go there and just do like an actor's audition. You have to be able to play a musical instrument. So it wasn't that they hired four actors and then made them pretend to play music. They hired four actors who could play music. Davy could play guitar, and he actually was a pretty good percussionist, because in the Monkees concerts, when Mickey did his solo turn, Davy would go up on stage and take over for Mickey on drums. In mid-beat. I mean, all you gotta do is look at the Monkees on Tour episode, and you can see it happen. So So yeah, they were all talented musically. I mean, Davy did have the Broadway background, so he had that musical theater background. So yeah, technically he was a musician because of that.
Sure.
And Peter came out of the Greenwich Village folk scene, and Mike Nesmith came out of the Los Angeles Hollywood Boulevard scene, and Mickey as well. So they all had musical talent. You know, I don't. Anybody who keeps saying, well, they don't have any, they never paid their dues. They did pay their dues. They did pay their dues. You know,
Mickey had. I mean, everybody. I think Mike's prehistory is known. But Mickey was also in a couple of early bands before the Monkees. He wasn't just an actor. That's that's a point to be made. And Davy, of course, was in theater, and and of course Oliver, the night that the Beatles were on the Ed Sullivan Show. So
right.
Peter, of course, Peter was a musician. Period. Because he came out of Greenwich Village.
Exactly. But, I mean, Peter hung around with people like John Sebastian and Stephen Stills and Mama Cass and those and Dylan and all those guys. And Peter played on the stage with Pete Seeger at Carnegie Hall during a folk concert. You know, so this is before the Monkees that Peter was on stage with Pete Seeger. So the man Peter of the four of them was the most musically talented. I mean, he studied music, so it was very frustrating for him when the Monkees started to go in the studio, ready to play guitar, and they look at him and say, "What are you doing with that thing? The record's done." You know that he felt humiliated by that because he's a trained musician, knows his craft, and yet they're telling him, "The record's done, go away." You know, I mean that broke his heart.
So, Fred, I wanted to ask you this because we're talking about the Monkees as musicians here. How was it decided? I mean, obviously, they sang on the records.
Yes.
You know, the producers thought enough of them to let them sing the lead vocals. How was it decided, well, you can do the lead vocals, but we're not going to let you play guitar or whatever? Where did they draw the line there?
I think what they did like, once they picked the four guys that were going to be the Monkees, they decided who's going to be the lead singer on the thing. So they did like demos and things with them or test recordings to determine who had the better voice. And it was determined that of the four of them, Mickey had the best voice for rock and roll and pop. Davy had a good voice, because of his Broadway training, and he could do like the ballads and things like that. But he was good. He could sing the more up tempo songs too. Mike, his voice was not so much suited for pop, but it was suited for more rock and roll and for country music. So that if you notice the first songs on Monkee songs with Mike singing lead, his songs have a more country feel to them. And then Peter, Papa Gene's Blues, and Peter, he was a folkie. So his voice, was not suited so much for pop, but it was suited for a more folk sound. So if you listen to the recordings of Peter from that period, is even some of the outtakes that show up on some of the as bonus cuts on some of the Monkee albums, you could hear the folk influence of Peter in those songs. Like For Pete's Sake, the song that was the closing song for the second season of the TV show, where you heard the closing credits. Peter wrote that song. And you sort of, get the folk message in that of peace and love in that song.
Sure.
Okay.
Al?
Yeah. Matter of fact, in kind of related to that, Fred has been involved with the Monkees, certainly in New York, for a very long time. And this is some years ago. And I forget who told me this story, but our mutual friend Charles Rosenet put on several years ago, kind of a general rock and roll pop culture convention, and Peter was one of the guests.
Yes.
And they did the usual Q&A, And of course, some jerk has to get up and ask, that the Monkees didn't play their instruments on their own records. And of course, Peter's been asked this about 8 million times.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And he kind of sighs, and he looks over at Fred, and he says, "Hey, Fred, you want to take this one?" And Fred,
I remember that.
And Fred kind of passed, and it turned out that Elaine McFarlane, Spanky from Spanky and Our Gang, was there, and she said, "Yeah, they're studio musicians. We use them too."
Right, that's the thing that always gets me about that whole, the Monkees didn't play their own instruments. Well,
right.
When you think about it, neither the Beach Boys,
yeah,
neither did Mamas and the Papas, neither did
Simon and Garfunkel.
Garfunkel, the Byrds in the first records.
Right.
Because all you got to do is see the movie, The Wrecking Crew, and the book about the Wrecking Crew.
Exactly.
It tells you the whole story. That everybody used studio musicians at the time. It was an industry standard. It was a standard practice in the music industry. So to single out the Monkees, I always thought was unfair. Because the same musicians that played on the Monkee records also played on Pet Sounds.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
So
what do you, Fred? Give for people who aren't really familiar with the musical progression of the Monkees. Give kind of a concise view of how they developed from the first album through now actually, but I mean, basically the albums before Good Times. How did they? What was the progression?
Well, the
because
first two,
they like the Beatles, they did progress.
Did.
That's a definite parallel with the Beatles.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, the first two albums were definitely the Don Kirshner period, where it was the songwriters and the Wrecking Crew studio musicians used, and they Tommy Boyce and Bobby Hart, who wrote Last Train to Clarksville, and a lot of their other songs like I Want to Be Free and Valerie, who deserve a lot of credit because they helped develop the Monkee sound, because they were actually the first producers of the early Monkee records, and they developed the sound of what the Monkees should sound like. And then Don Kirshner, when he got involved in the project, because he wasn't signed to the project yet, Boyce and Hart were doing the records first, and they thought they were going to be the producers. And then Don Kirshner was hired because he had the stable of songwriters. So he was hired to do the musical supervision on it. So Boyce and Hart were out as producers. But then Don Kirshner tried to get people like Mickey Most and producers like that to produce the Monkee records, and it didn't sound right. They didn't get that sound, and they called back Boyce and Hart to help develop the sound. So, like I said, Boyce and Hart deserve a lot of the credit for those early records. And Michael Nesmith, he was able to push his songs enough to get two of his songs on the first two albums. He had 2 songs on the first album and 2 songs on the second album. And his songs on the first albums don't sound anything like the rest of the record. If you know, you just have to listen to Nesmith's stuff on the first album. It says, this is something other, something. This is not Last Train to Clarksville. This is something totally something else. And so they had when they had the big brouhaha with Don Kirshner, the Palace Rebellion, where they made an ultimatum that, well, if you know the whole story, Kirshner was taking credit for a lot of the music and all that, for the songs becoming hits. And this not only irked the Monkees, it irked the producers, who were Bob Rafelson and Bert Schneider's, the guys who created the concept and the series and everything. And they said, he seems to be overstepping his bounds here. And it really hit the fan when the powers that be said for the next Monkee single, which was going to be A Little Bit Me, A Little Bit You, the B-side has to have the boys playing their own music on their own song. And the song was going to be The Girl I Knew Somewhere, written by Mike Nesmith. So Kirshner, who was a control freak, basically, didn't want to give up that control. So he released the single A Little Bit Me, A Little Bit You prior to the release date in Canada, and the B-side was an early version of She Hangs Out with Davy doing the vocals. It was a totally different arrangement. Mm-hmm. And that sort of like said, okay, you just reached the contract, kid. And Kirshner was sued. He was sued, and they bought him off. He was fired from the project. And the Monkees were not only allowed to record the next single, the B-side for the next single, but to go on to record the music for their third album, which would become Headquarters. And Mike Nesmith went out and got Chip Douglas, who worked with the Turtles, to produce the record. And Chip didn't really have that much experience producing a record, but Mike Nesmith said, "Don't worry, I'll show you what to do." And Mike, from the very beginning, he was the one who was like guiding the Monkees into what his vision of what the Monkees should be. And you could hear that in the Headquarters album. You could the jangly guitars and the direction of the songs were more introspective and much more creative. You listen to a song like Shades of Grey, totally different from anything from the first two albums.
Right.
And Mickey got to shine in particular with Randy Scouse Git. His first songwriting credit as a Monkee, which was, if you know the story behind that, that was when the Monkees did their first tour of England in 1967, and they were invited by the Beatles to a party. The Beatles threw a party for the Monkees, and the song is basically Mickey's diary of all the events regarding the party, where he met his first wife, Samantha Just. Mama Cass is in the song somewhere, and the Beatles are referred to as the Four Kings of EMI. Mm-hmm. So yeah, from there you got the creative leap. It's from the first two albums to Headquarters, which is a huge chasm of a leap. To go from one to the other, and then you go to the next album, Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, and Jones, and that's why we're hitting Sgt. Pepper's material territory now. Because that again was produced by Chip Douglas, and again you had these amazing songs, and the guys were on fire on that. Now here's the difference between Headquarters and Pisces, in that while Headquarters was mostly the Monkees playing with some studio musicians here and there, Pisces was a mixture of the two, where the Monkees were playing some of the music on it, but they still had studio musicians augmenting everything else. So Mickey's not playing drums on all the songs on the album, but he's on there. But again, you got Mickey also expressing his creativity with using the Moog synthesizer on some of the songs. Mm-hmm. And Mickey, I think Pisces is the first. Correct me if I'm wrong. Allan Kozin will probably know this better than anybody. Okay, but Pisces is probably the first pop album to use a Moog on pop songs. I think. I think what
I don't know of any.
I think the door.
I'm thinking Brian Wilson may have done it first. That's just a guess though.
Well, he used the theremin on Good Vibrations, but
right. I think the Doors use a Moog also, but I'm not sure where that sits in the chronology
I think it's a little later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the Monkees, I think, were the first pop band to use a Moog on a pop record, and it shows in songs like Daily Nightly, in Love Is Only Sleeping, in Star Collector. Mm-hmm. You're hearing these weird sounds that gel in there, and it just works. They did
Daily Nightly during the tour with Nesmith. Was it last year or the year before? God, that's just
2013.
Yeah, that was just amazing to see them do that in concert. It was absolutely wonderful.
And have you ever seen the videos of that? That's hysterical, because
the original videos?
Yeah, the videos, because Mickey's saying that Mike found a Moog for us, and then Mike says, "Well, I didn't find a Moog, but I found a picture of one," and they showed it on the screen, and then Mike said, "Don't worry, we'll get the sounds right." And as Mickey's singing the song, Mike is doing the Moog sounds with his mouth,
right,
vocally,
right,
and it's hysterical. You got to, you go on YouTube, you'll find them. So, okay, well, we got the Pisces, so they got a mixture of the the studio musicians and the Monkees themselves. And plus, remember, Pisces also introduced Harry Nilsson into the mix. You got with Cuddly Toy, you know. So again, and Michael Murphy's on that too, with the song "What Am I Doing Hanging Round." So you still had some really great writers, and Carole King and Jerry Goffin with Pleasant Valley Sunday, you know, which is considered perhaps their best single, you know. So you still have that mix of creativity, and then you get into the next album, the fifth album, Birds and Bees and Monkees, which is sort of like a hybrid. Again, which is more, some tracks they're on it, and some tracks, again, are mostly the studio musicians. But then you get into weirder stuff, especially with Nesmith, you know, with songs like Tapioca Tundra, Auntie's Municipal Court, Righting Wrongs, and Magnolia Sims. You got the whole gamut. It's all spread out there. It's more of that album is more of a hodgepodge. It's more like a mixed bag. So it's probably not as cohesive as Headquarters or Pisces, but it has its little charms here and there. It has little gems are in there. And now, shall we plow into Head?
Well, I was just going to say, Head's a different animal altogether. Let's talk about the movie first. Give me your straight-out opinion of the movie.
I personally love the album. I mean, I like the album too, but I personally like the movie because I think, in my opinion, it's probably the most artistically creative thing they ever did. You know, I know commercially it was not a hit. You know, it's not what you would think a Monkee movie would be, but it was more the view of the director Bob Rafelson, his commentary on commercialism and the battle of commercialism and corporatism against the creativity of the individual, I think, because
I was going to say they basically tried to destroy their image. They really wanted to tear it down, and they wanted to, you know, break out of the like the Beatles wanted to break out of the Fab Four, you know, the Fab Four image. The Monkees wanted to break away from the little television group and you know, become individuals and get a little more respect. And in some respects back then, I don't think that people understood it, but I think it's a lot more appreciated now. A lot.
It is. I think. I mean, you had Jack Nicholson involved in there. All four Monkees, even though they're not credited per se, they had a hand in writing the script. And Jack Nicholson was the album supervisor of the soundtrack album. So so that's a whole different animal right there. But the movie and the album, both, in my opinion, have the best songs that the Monkees ever recorded. A group of the best songs they ever recorded. All those songs are amazing.
As we go along.
Porpoise Song, Circle Sky.
I love Porpoise Song is one of my favorite Monkee songs. Absolutely,
song
I love that song to death.
That's my favorite Monkee song.
The first time I heard Porpoise Song, I said, "This is like Walrus," you know. It's just like Walrus. And then Daddy's Song, again written by Harry Nilsson, which I think was probably Davy's best performance on film, you know, bar none. I'll tell you a little story. The year that Davy died, a few months later, my friend Eric Lefkowitz, who wrote another one of the best, another great Monkees book, the Monkey's Tale and Monkey Business. He invited me to this screening of Head, which included on the panel Kurt Loder from MTV and Rolling Stone. You know, I was in the audience, but I was able to ask questions and stuff. But when they played the movie and they got to Daddy's Song, everybody was enjoying the movie. They were having a good time. When they got to Daddy's Song, everybody was quiet. You know, everybody, the whole room was quiet, and we're just staring at the screen because Davy had just passed a few months before. And when he gets to, and then when the part of the song in the movie where it just stops, and Davy just sings a cappella, "The years have passed and so have I." I don't think there was a dry eye in the house.
I'll bet.
Oh my gosh.
Oh man.
And then after the sequence was finished, the whole place exploded with applause. You know, because we had just lost Davy, and they just had that scene, and it just hit home. even more at that moment, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, I still think about that moment every time.
Oh,
you know.
sure.
I'll bet. Yeah.
And there were some great people in that movie. Zappa was in it.
Frank Zappa,
Annette Funicello was in it. I mean, there were Tim Buckley. I mean, there were some wonderful people.
No, not Tim Buckley. Not Tim Buckley. Tim Buckley appeared in the last episode of the TV series.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
But if you blink, you will miss Jack Nicholson and Dennis Hopper in the movie.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Anybody want to comment on the?
And Sonny Liston, who we talked about last week.
And Sonny Liston and Ray Nitschke. And Carol Dota, who just passed away about a year or so ago.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anyway, carry on, John.
I think of those two songs that Al mentioned, both written by Carole King and Jerry Goffin, shows how great, what a songwriting team to be able to expand into something so entirely different, really into psychedelia for them.
Oh, yeah.
With the Porpoise song and As We Go Along,
and
which I was so happy in recent years Mickey's been doing live.
Mm-hmm. So. And I got to give credit to Peter Tork. I think he wrote two of the best songs here recorded with the Monkees. Can You Dig It? And Do I Have to Do This All Over Again?
Mm-hmm.
And for those who check liner notes in CD booklets, whatever, be aware that As We Go Along has Neil Young playing guitar on that.
Mm-hmm. Really?
Ooh.
Yes. And
I never knew that.
And Stephen Stills is playing on Do I Have to Do This All Over Again?
Wow.
So for all those people out there that said the Monkees didn't have any credibility, I say,
yeah, absolutely.
In fact, they had Zappa in the movie. I mean, that was credibility. By the way, also in Head was Victor Mature, Terry Garr. I think Al, you mentioned Carol Dota. So
Carol Dota, also Tony Basil.
Oh, okay. Tony Basil.
Yeah.
I mean that was
Tony Basil, because she's doing the dancing sequence with Davy in Daddy's song, and of course she came out years later with the song Mickey.
Sure.
Number one record.
And that concert sequence. Where the group plays live is absolutely wonderful.
It is. It's probably someone once said it's probably one of the best filmed rock and roll concert sequences ever.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a great song. Circle Sky is such a great song. I'm glad that they did that when Mike toured with them, and it was great to hear that, because it's such a great song. Do a real quick thing about the reunions, Fred.
Okay, well, let me just briefly about the other three albums. Instant Replay has some really good songs in it. It's a mixture of earlier songs with newer songs. And one of my favorite Monkee songs is on that album, Instant Replay. It's While I Cry by Nesmith. Mm-hmm. I think it has fantastic guitars and beautiful vocal harmonies. Monkees Presents was a project that was originally going to be the four of them. It was going to be a double record set with each side having dedicated to each Monkee. Didn't happen when Peter quit, and they condensed the concept to one album where they had an equal number of songs on the album, and that album contains Listen to the Band and a couple of songs that Davy wrote and some that Mickey wrote, which are all good. A French song which Davy co-wrote with Bill Chadwick wrote that song. Yeah, I think it's one of the best performances that Davy ever did with the Monkees, in my opinion. And then we go to the last album, Changes, which Mike had quit, Peter had quit previously, and that was going back to the concept of the first two albums where they were just the singers and the songs were provided for them. And it's a good pop album. There are some good songs on it. Mickey's Midnight Train, I think, is a standout. And the last song on the album is a Voice and Heart song, I Never Thought It Peculiar, which was a good showcase for Davy. So it has its good and bad moments, but it's not the worst album they ever did. So now moving ahead, reunion years.
Let me ask a quick thing about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, because that's a big issue.
Yes.
I mean, I know how you feel about it, but I'm starting to think, and guys, please weigh in. I'm starting to think that this album, the Good Times album, may help that cause a lot. Because number one, they got a really good review from Rolling Stone, which really surprised me. But I mean, it's been praised by a lot of the critics. It's selling well, which on its own doesn't necessarily mean anything. But I think that they are on the verge of getting a lot more respect, and maybe we'll get surprised, and maybe they will get nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
I'm both shocked and stunned. No. But no, I am thrilled with all the positive press that the Monkees are getting for this album, for Good Times, and for the 50th anniversary tour, especially from Rolling Stone, which I was totally shocked by because of all the bad press.
Yeah,
I mean, Mickey used to call them Rolling Stain.
Really?
Yes.
I think I asked at least Peter and Mickey about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and they both said, they both kind of didn't get real, strong about it, but you could tell they would really love it. And it's just too bad Davy's not around.
Well, Davy, I think Davy did an interview on a few years ago, which he was asked about Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and he felt, we do deserve to be in there. It would be nice if we could be in there.
I think that's I think he told me that too when I talked to one of the 2 times I talked to him. Mm-hmm. So and I since we're plugging books, by the way, I hate to mention it, but I have one book, and it's a Monkees book.
Yeah,
it's called Eat a Monkee, Davy Jones. It's a condensation of my 2 interviews with Davy Jones, and one of them actually has a lot of Beatles content because he talks about the night that the Beatles were on the Ed Sullivan Show, and he talks about he was quoted at one point as saying the Beatles were manufactured, and I got a hold of him to counter that, and he countered that. So that's basically, and that's available through Amazon and all the usual places, Nook, and so. But anyway,
selling right next to my book.
Right. selling right next to your book, yeah. Fred. But yeah,
Fred, let me ask you a question that might tie the kind of the reunion albums all together. What is it about Good Times that seems to work so much better than either Justice or Pool It did?
I think what it is that Pool It and Justice. Now, going to Pool It, I think because it's a product of the 80s. You could the 80s production just permeates that album. I mean, there's some good songs on it. Heart and Soul, I think, is a great single. But I think they were trying too hard to compete with what the pop scene was at the time. And they had Roger Bertrand, I can't remember the name, but he produced Squeeze and people like that. And it was a matter of they chose songs that would have been great for an 80s pop act, but were not necessarily good for the Monkees. Davy, I think, said, on this album, you're not going to hear those jangly guitars. Well, you didn't. I like Peter's songs on that album because I thought he should, the song he did, Getting In, had a bit of creativity in there. It almost sounded it reminded me of a Prince song, in a way. And Davy's ballads were good, but overall it had too much of an 80s sheen. And because of that, I think it dates more than even the original Monkee albums from the 60s. Just Us, the concept was good, whereas it was produced by the Monkees, the songs were written by the Monkees, and all the music is by the Monkees. I think that was good. The problem was that it was produced in the 90s, and what we have in the 90s, we had the grunge thing going on. And I think they were trying too hard, again, to reach a certain audience. It doesn't help also that Mike, of all the vocals that Mike did on that album, it was a remake of Circle Sky.
Yeah.
And I always felt that album needed a Nesmith ballad. If you listen to Michael Nesmith's solo albums, especially from Infinite Rider and Tropical Campfires, there's some beautiful Mike Nesmith ballads on that. I thought that's what Just Us needed. It needed a Mike Nesmith ballad.
Yeah.
It had a very rough, angry edge to it. I think that's what was one of the problems with Just Us. It was too angry. It was an angry record.
I actually liked it a lot.
Oh, I like it too. I think there's some good songs, but there's an element of anger in that album. And I think because it doesn't sound like a a classic Monkees album. And that's where we get to Good Times. Good Times sounds like a classic Monkees album.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that's what they were aiming for. That's what Andrew Sandoval was aiming for. That's what who's the producer? It's Adam Schlesinger. Yes, from Fountains of Wayne. That's what they were aiming for. They wanted to sound like a classic Monkees album from the 1960s. They wanted the songs. Those songs could have been on Pisces. Some of those songs could have been on Pisces. You know.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's brilliant. You know what they did.
It is. It is.
To get
and
the guys.
Since you mentioned Andrew Sandoval, let's a toast to Andrew Sandoval. For
all the work
he's done.
Yeah.
Oh,
very
a lot
much
of credit.
Andrew, if you're listening, you're the man. You're fantastic.
You're the guy. I bow to Andrew Sandoval as a Monkee expert. You know, I bow to him.
He's amazing.
I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy.
Sure you are, Fred.
But no, to have people like Rivers Cuomo from Weezer, and to have like Noel Gallagher and Paul Weller and the guys
Andy
from
Partridge.
Andy Partridge to write songs for them, I thought, wow, you know, it's amazing, and it shows how much respect a lot of today's composers in rock and roll and pop have for the Monkees today. Mm-hmm. You know, that says a lot right there, that they wanted to be part of this project. You know, that's incredible. And then to have quality songs from the Monkees themselves writing, you know. The song I Know What I Know by Michael Nesmith is a great song. Now, he recorded solo previously, and the solo version has more orchestration on it. But this version that's on Good Times is simple. It's a much more simpler arrangement. It's almost would you say more acoustic or stripped down. That's what I think that's the word I'm looking for. It's more stripped down version, and it adds. It's more exactly. That's the word I'm looking for. Intimate. It gives a more intimacy to the song and the lyrics, and Nesmith's performance on that is just amazing. And then there's the song that Noel Gallagher and Paul Weller wrote, "Birth of an Accidental Hipster." That's
that one I like a lot. Yeah.
That's like Tapioca Tundra Jr. You know.
Yeah.
You know, it's like a mixture of Tapioca Tundra and Righting Wrongs. And Mickey's middle eight in that song is great. So I just have a lot of praise for this album. And then you mentioned, Steve, the bonus cuts.
Right.
The two that could be found on the iTunes, and the other ones that could spread around like on FYE and on the Japanese CD and the upcoming Barnes & Noble vinyl. Those bonus cuts are good too. And yeah, I agree. They should have been on the album, and I think you're right. They're going to pull a McCartney and release a deluxe edition later on with those songs on there.
Yeah, I've tried to I've asked, and nobody's saying anything, which generally means something's being considered. So I hope they do that. Anybody want to make any final comments before we sign off? Because I know we're getting close.
Definitely, Allan? I think You Bring the Summer. You Bring the Summer is such an excellent pop song. I mean, give the credit there to Andy Partridge for writing that one. It belongs, like it could have been a single in 1966.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. And Mike Nesmith is so proud of his baby deep voice in that song. When you hear that little baby coming up, that's Mike Nesmith doing that.
Okay.
Well, anyway, Fred, this has been incredible. We got to thank you a whole lot.
I'm humbled that you guys asked me to be on tonight. I'm really thrilled, and I appreciate you guys asking me to be on tonight.
Oh, it's our pleasure.
Oh, you're our pleasure. Our pleasure. Thank you for coming in and on short notice too. We really appreciate that.
Oh,
so.
Anytime you want to bring Mickey over on the show.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if Mickey is listening,
Mike's
we'd
welcome.
love to have you.
Well, that's
Peter
right,
or Mike.
Well, remember that Mike did Skype the New York concert.
Right, Andrew. We'll be glad to. We'll do this again. We'd love to do it again.
Yeah.
Well, Mike wanted to be on. Mike wanted to be on, but he's on hold right now. I have to tell him to come back later.
All right. For anybody that wants to get a hold of us, you can write to us at thingswesaidtodayradioshow@gmail.com. We have a Facebook page. We have a Facebook group page. We have a Facebook radio page. And so anytime we'd love to hear what you think about this show or any other show that we've done. You can hear our shows on podbean.com and on YouTube. We have a channel on YouTube, Things We Said Today, where most of our shows, not all of them, but most of them are uploaded where you can stream them without having to download them if you don't want to. Mm-hmm. Anybody got anything to say before we call it quits?
Well, on my website, just want to make a quick mention that since I have trivia every single week where you can win one of 9 prizes, a new prize is called Pure McCartney. It's the 2 CD set from Paul spanning his entire career. So if you want to win that, you can go to my website on the trivia page and enter to win. KenMichaelsRadio.com.
Okay. All right. And I'm also, as of this writing, by the time this goes up, I'm giving away 5 copies of that 2 CD set. If you look through my review of Pure McCartney on the McCartney Examiner page, the details are at the bottom. And that contest ends on the 17th, on June 17th. So if you're hearing this before June 17th, catch my review of Pure McCartney on Paul McCartney Examiner, and the details are at the bottom of the story on how to enter. So I think that's it. Fred, again, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Say hello to Mickey and Peter and Michael if you see them.
I'll give them their regard. I'll give them your regards, guys. And can I give my little plug too?
Please
go ahead.
Okay. Well. All right, folks, you can get my book, A Little Bit Me, A Little Bit You, The Monkees from a Fan's Perspective. You can get it on Amazon, on Apple iBooks, Barnes & Noble Nook, Smashwords, CreateSpace, and I'm sure you could order it at some of your bookstores, excuse me. Also, if you would like to get a signed copy of my book, you could find me on my Facebook page. Just look up Fred Velez, you'll find me. And just send me a private message, and we'll work out the particulars, and we'll get a signed copy to you. And also, I'm a writer for the Monkees.net. I have a blog there, so you can find my blog articles there as well.
And you did not mention, I am surprised, that the Zilch, the excellent Monkees podcast Zilch, which I've heard some episodes of that. And Zilch people, if you're listening, I would love to talk to you for Monkees Examiner. I've sent them notes, so I would love to do a story about that because it's a great little podcast.
Yes,
as far as I know, it's the only one for the Monkees. There's no others. I mean, there's several Beatles ones, but I don't think there's another one for the Monkees.
Yes, that's Ken Mills and Melanie Mitchell and Sarah Clark who do it, and they do a fantastic job. I've been on that show. On that podcast several times. So definitely, folks, check out the Zilch podcast if you want to hear all things Monkees. There have been some great updates on the tour and the album, so definitely check it out.
Okay.
Zilch.
And I will give my personal email address, BeatlesExaminer@gmail.com. I know we're running short of time. Al or Allan, do you have anything to say before we go?
Nope.
Nope. Okay, and I'll give one last plug for my book. Meet a Monkee, Davy Jones is on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and just about everywhere else. Anyway, thanks for listening. This has been a great show, and we hope you will be with us next week at all the usual places. And until then, this is Steve Marinucci for Ken Michaels, Al Sussman, and Allan Kozin and Fred Velez saying thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.